Hey, it's Tom Childers. We're back for an exciting continuation of an ongoing series. Where we last left off, orange and yellow. Both of them got me like really going, and I started pretty much lighting myself a flame with the energy in support of the idea of civil society as a negotiated power structure system between the forces of centralized and decentralized power, or the centralization and the really, I want to say decentralization, but it's actually the breaking down or the dissolving of power. It's the consolidating and the dissolving of power. And so the institutional setup that allows for both, not just decentralized power, which is much more of a sovereign state, and a hyper localism, that's more decentralized power. But the revolution energy idea is actually the breaking apart of centralized power. And so the breaking apart of power and the consolidation of power meets far away off with the civil society. And what that means is that there's particular institutions that are set up that allow for representatives to be decided, governments to be established, and institutions that occur and that sustain their own existence, but can be modulated as necessary, but less necessary than you would like. And so the idea of checks and balances in a governance blueprint is, well, it's like next level shit. It's like it makes all the difference. In the past 2,000 years, people have been trying to figure out checks and balances. They actually have been trying it for 2,000 years before then. The idea of an emperor, a local governor, the Sadducees and the Pharisees was during the New Testament times, and like these are not like the first times people have thought of these ideas. And what people used to do is they used to write the records and the stories of how rulers led their nations and the errors and follies that they had. And those books ended up being like long books of kings with all like the different facts and stuff. And only through many years and many people telling many stories, and we realized in a historical sense that remembering the details is not nearly as effective at helping us make decisions as understanding how to synthesize and extract the abstractions of the details. And so it's a constant struggle of learning more details and then understanding the import of those details, not just for me or you, but for all of us, and for all of us all the time as time goes through its iterations of civilization. We're not like all alone in this like search. Like that's kind of the point of what I was trying to like break down. And we have starting points, and we don't just have starting points. We have signals from the actual world, and we have projects that have begun, and that some have succeeded and some have not succeeded. and we've developed evaluation methods, and we have great specialization of our societies, not just as different nations, but also as different industries and different like transitions from the beginning to the end, like throughout life and for all the different people. So we have a very complex system, the most complex that has ever been. We happen to be in another record-breaking year for humanity and the history of the world. And one of the things that we need as a people right now is to basically we need to reclaim our like a spiritual foundation so that we can feel more right with the way that we are, and we can appreciate what it is that where we find ourselves, because that's the name of the game. That's been the name of the game for a long time. Irregardless, like I love that word, irregardless. There are two parallel ideas to the sides of civil societies we have in the West and epitomized by the United States. There's the Tradcons, or the long way is traditional conservatives, and there's laissez-faire capitalism, and there's the evangelicals are more like orthodoxical than the Tradcons, and the libertarians and like minarchists are much more individualistic than capitalists or Tradcons, and the convergence over here is basically it's taking a value-based system that integrates what we've known from the past and what we know that we need today, and holding course, which is what got us here. You know what I mean? It's like it's what got us here. So we should protect and preserve that which got us here. And there's a lot of value to that. And the people that take up that banner ought to be respected and celebrated, even if they're being like undermined or challenged. Like maybe not undermined so much, but approached and like in confrontational ways, but an invitation to like understand the world as it ought to be understood, because there's a lot of reasons that are basically embody nihilism that are justified in recognizing that some of our traditions that we're conserving aren't actually long-standing traditions. They're actually traditions that have just got picked up kind of recently, and you were asleep at the wheel is a great thing to say to those who are all bent upon conserving traditions that they didn't have, like they weren't conserved like before them. Like, what gives you the right to conserve these traditions, impose them on us? But there's something like underlying that the people in this position might not be suited for explaining, because we might not know why we have certain traditions. Like, and that's why we count on like the torchbearers of like the dogma and orthodoxy, who've tried things out, who have given it a shot, rise or fall of their society. Like, we have the advantage of knowing way more about like ancient truths than people have ever had before. Like, we have the access to all the ancient truths and all the ancient wisdom of different continents that never even known each other existed. Once they separated their migrations. And so we have a fantastic opportunity to be able to like appreciate and like you know, it's I'll tell you a little bit of a spoiler. It's almost entirely going to be the Christianity as the end all of like what's sacred wisdom's top shelf. But that doesn't mean to take away that the roundness of our each of our personalities can appreciate and benefit from the different ways of looking at the world. And even Jesus Christ himself said that, being a separate source of inspiration and modality than God the Father, who was the reigning ideology of the Jews at the time that they killed him for saying it. He basically stood up to the powers that be and said, listen, your laws you got carried away. This is not how you live. We have to be able to live the way that life is lived, from the perspective of us through him. And he teaches you how to be through him. Now, there's a little bit of a catch where he leaves us to wait for the apostles after him to figure out now what. And so the idea of how to build a church and have the church be the reigning authority, not forcefully, but out of choice by the communities that choose to self-organize, that's like how to build a church. That's the rest of the story after the four Gospels. And that's what like the rest of the New Testament is. It's describing the spiritual organization of person's individual mentality and how to work together with other people who also opt to have that same mentality. And so it's the development of a civil society. It's the concept of civil society it implies chosen. It's not like so much voluntarism as much as self-selected. Like, if you don't like it, leave. Right? I mean, if you don't want to be in this society, then go into a society that doesn't like you. I mean, like, you get to choose your society. But one of the problems we have is those who choose our society shouldn't be allowed to change our society. And so there needs to be something in our society, and it can't be authoritarian. So how are we going to organize that? Well, we need to be self-selecting of our own institutions. We need to be able to manage the motion and the development of our culture, but also manage it by stopping it and changing it, which means it's like the most important thing that a Tradcon respects is the rule of law, which means most importantly that the laws are created by the people who have to obey the laws. I mean, in the traditional sense, and that there's a court system that is not electable, that is in charge of like controlling and checking the application of the relevance, the legality, based on the principles that are like pre-set, unless you change the constitutions. And so we have elections for judges, which is problematic. And you know, we have like all sorts of systems right now that we basically have lost all sense of why we do to checks and balances. The only people who study checks and balances these days apparently are like 6th graders, and they do it right after they study like global studies of the Incas and I don't want to pick on any modern society, but they probably pick the weird societies that do weird things as like an example of diversity or multiculturalism. Like, why would you not pick the specific multiple cultures that lead us to be who we are? But then, that requires reason and transcendence, which is the most expensive mental process. So that's why we don't do that with the cheap educators that we hire. Fresh out of the press. They hit the road. Bunch of, grit and inspiration to change the world. And they never even met the world yet. I don't know how you can sign up for a project like that. Can you imagine going to a class with a person who's never done what it is they're going to teach you how to do? And if they were teaching you how to do it, would you not assume that they would also be hiring you to do it? Because if they're going to charge you to teach you how to do something, then it must not be that valuable to do. Right? Because I think that I would rather do something that's worth something. Pay to do something that's worthless. Maybe everything costs. I don't know. It's complicated.